The wind swept through the West Virginia mountains with a constant howl, dragging dry leaves across the thin, snow-covered ground. Inside the old wooden cabin, Ben Carter sharpened his axe blade, the metallic sound echoing like a reminder of his loneliness. His face, marked by time and pain, reflected the life of a man who preferred isolation to remembering. Outside, the forests surrounded the house like a wall of shadows. The only movement came from the low fire flickering in the fireplace, spreading a warm light that contrasted with the biting cold. Ben had lived there for almost 20 years, since the day he lost everything that gave meaning to his existence. The war had left him with scars on his skin and soul, but what truly wounded him was his daughter and the guilt he carried for driving her away. In that forgotten mining village, people whispered stories about the old lumberjack who talked to himself and avoided everyone's gaze. He didn't mind. Loneliness, after all, was a deserved punishment. Mornings started early, with the snapping of branches and the strong smell of sap. Ben cut firewood to sell in Cedar Hollow, driving down the steep trail in his old pickup truck. People greeted him with distrust or pretended not to see him. He preferred it that way. Human contact was a distant memory, like a forgotten scar beneath clothing. All that remained was the sound of axes, the wind in the trees, and the echo of his own conscience. At night, while drinking bitter coffee and watching the fire, the memories returned. His daughter's voice, crying and begging him to understand, the sound of the door slamming, the silence that followed. It was in this emptiness that Ben sank, wishing the guilt would erase the pain, but it only kept it alive. He didn't know that on that very night, Destiny was walking down the snow-covered road, bringing with it the first breath of redemption. Before we go on, if Ben's loneliness has touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel. Here, every story is a reminder that even the most broken hearts can find a new beginning. Click subscribe and come feel it with us. The storm arrived without warning, with thunder that shook the mountains and lightning that tore through the sky. Ben was driving along the muddy road, trying to reach the village before the river bridge gave way. That's when his truck's headlights illuminated a small figure collapsed on the roadside. A moment of doubt paralyzed him, but instinct spoke louder. He slammed on the brakes. The boy was soaked, shivering from the cold, his face covered in mud. Ben picked him up in his arms and carried him to the truck, wrapping him in an old blanket. "Hey, kid, can you hear me?" he asked, getting no response, only the sound of choked crying and chattering teeth. The old veteran felt something strange, an unrestlessness he hadn't felt in years. Back at the cabin, Ben hurriedly rekindled the fire. He took off his heavy coat and draped it over the small boy's body. The child looked to be about 8 years old, too thin, with marks on his wrists and ankles. As Ben watched him sleep, he felt an uneasy sensation, as if this stranger carried with him an echo of the past. He tried to push the thought away, but couldn't. Hours later, the boy woke with a start. "What's your name?" Ben asked, his tone calm. The boy hesitated before answering. "Finn." Just that, a name and a look that said more than any words. Ben nodded, asking no further questions. Deep down, he knew something was seriously wrong. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside the cabin, a new one was brewing. Ben didn't know who this boy was or where he came from, but he felt that somehow, fate had brought them together for a reason he didn't yet understand. And as the fire crackled in the fireplace, he murmured to himself, "You're not supposed to be here, kid, but maybe I need you as much as you need me." The next morning dawned cold, covered in a thick fog that swallowed the trees in the valley. Ben woke early, lit the fire, and made coffee. The silence was broken only by the crackling of burning wood. Finn slept on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, his face serene, but his half-closed eyes revealed his rest was uneasy. The old man watched him with a mix of curiosity and compassion. When the smell of coffee filled the air, Finn got up, rubbing his eyes. "Are you hungry?" Ben asked, handing him a piece of bread with butter. The boy nodded timidly, avoiding the man's gaze. With each bite, he looked around as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "Where are your parents?" Ben pressed. The answer came softly, almost a whisper. "I don't have any." The old man felt a knot tighten in his chest. "And where did you come from?" he tried again. Finn looked away, and silence filled the space. Ben realized pressing him would be useless. He knew all too well what it meant to run from the past. "It's okay. You can stay here for now," he said, trying to sound indifferent. But inside, something was stirring, a long-forgotten feeling. During the day, Ben tried to keep busy. He chopped wood, fixed fences, and fed the animals. Finn watched him in silence, sometimes helping, other times just following him. The boy seemed to understand the weight of things without needing explanations. When the sun set, they shared dinner in silence. "Thank you," Finn murmured. Those were his first spontaneous words. That night, Ben took a long time to fall asleep. The boy's voice echoed in his head. That "thank you" seemed to carry something more. Trust, maybe even hope. He realized it had been a long time since he'd heard a word that made him feel needed. And that, more than any memory, began to break down the walls he had built around himself. The following days brought a quiet and unexpectedly light routine. Finn began to speak more, helped with small tasks, and smiled shyly when Ben praised him. It was a subtle but powerful change. The old man found himself smiling too, something he hadn't done in decades. Yet amid the calm, something bothered him deeply. The boy's gaze. There was something familiar about it.
One evening, while clearing the table after dinner, Ben found a small wooden crucifix lying on the floor. "Whose is this?" he asked. Finn replied, "It was my mother's." The old man froze. "What was her name?" he asked, trying to hide his unease. "Lena," the boy answered. The spoon fell from Ben's hand, its metallic clatter echoing through the kitchen. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Lena was his daughter's name, the same daughter he had thrown out of the house years ago when she was pregnant. Ben's mind raced, trying to deny the obvious. It could be a coincidence, but fate was rarely this cruel. He went to his room and pulled an old photograph from a box. Lena, smiling, still a teenager, wearing the same crucifix. His heart pounded. The next day, he watched Finn playing in the yard, kicking stones and laughing to himself. The smile, the way he furrowed his brow, everything was identical to his daughter. Ben felt a mix of hope and despair. If this boy was truly his grandson, it meant Lena had died without him knowing. The guilt, once dormant, now crushed his chest all over again. That night, sitting by the fireplace, Ben closed his eyes and murmured, "What have I done, Lena?" Outside, the wind whistled through the window cracks like a distant reply. The peace he had begun to feel was now turning into turmoil. The past, which he had buried under the silence of the mountains, was coming back to demand payment. 2 days later, the sound of a distant engine broke the mountain silence. Ben watched from the window as a white pickup truck made its way up the muddy trail. When it stopped in front of the cabin, a young woman stepped out, straightening her coat and displaying a shiny badge. "Evelyn Moore, Child Protective Services. Are you Benjamin Carter?" she asked, her voice firm and professional. Ben nodded warily.
She explained that she was investigating the disappearance of a boy named Finn O'Connor who had gone missing a week earlier from a nearby foster home. Ben kept his expression neutral, but inside, his heart raced. Evelyn noticed something in his eyes and studied him carefully. "May we talk inside, Mr. Carter?" The old man hesitated, but opened the door. As she asked questions, Finn hid behind the wall, peeking out. Evelyn noticed the movement and softened her tone. "I'm not here to take anyone away, Mr. Carter. I just want to make sure he's safe." Ben took a deep breath and called the boy over. Finn appeared trembling. "I'm your friend," she said, kneeling to his level. "May I see if you're okay?" Trust came slowly, but the boy eventually nodded. Evelyn discreetly examined Finn's wrists, marked with faint bruises. Her expression hardened. This confirmed her suspicions. He needs protection, and someone who genuinely wants him around, she said, looking at Ben with a mix of empathy and firmness. As she left, she placed her card on the table. "I'll be back tomorrow, and I hope you'll be willing to talk honestly." Ben stood motionless, watching the car disappear into the fog. Deep down, he knew she was right. Finn needed someone, and perhaps, for the first time in many years, so did he.
That night, Ben barely slept. Evelyn's words echoed in his mind, mixed with the face of his daughter that haunted his dreams. When dawn painted the sky gray, he decided to search through Finn's backpack, not out of distrust, but from fear of what he might find. Among dirty clothes and broken toy pieces, there was a plastic folder. Inside, he found documents, old photographs, and a birth certificate. The blood ran cold in his veins. The mother's name was there, Lena Carter. The photo showed a woman with a sweet smile holding a newborn baby. It was her, his daughter. Ben's hands trembled as memories came flooding back with violent force. He knelt down, the crumpled paper in his fists, silent tears falling on the wooden floor. Finn found him like that, motionless, and asked innocently, "Did you know my mom?" Ben couldn't answer. The boy then pulled a broken necklace from his pocket, the same wooden crucifix. She said this was from her family. The old man felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Fate was punishing him, and rightly so. Later, when Evelyn returned, Ben showed her the documents. "He's my grandson," he said, his voice choked. Evelyn watched him in silence, understanding the pain and shock overwhelming him. "Then it's time to stop hiding, Mr. Carter. If you want to protect him, you'll have to face what you left behind." As she left, Ben watched Finn playing near the window. The boy was laughing, unaware of the weight his name carried. And in that smile, Ben saw his daughter's reflection and the silent promise of a second chance he didn't deserve, but that fate, for some reason, had granted him.
Dawn brought a heavy silence. Ben moved through the cabin like a ghost, feeling the weight of every memory resurfacing. The revelation that Finn was his grandson had broken something inside him, and at the same time rekindled a forgotten flame. The walls seemed to whisper with voices from the past. Lena's scream, the slam of the door, the rain falling the night she left. He thought of every unspoken word, every gesture that could have changed everything. Finn watched him quietly, sensing the anguish in the air. "Are you mad at me?" the boy asked hesitantly. Ben turned slowly, kneeling before him. "No, son, never at you." His voice broke, and for a moment, Finn saw tears in the old man's eyes. "I made mistakes, Finn. I failed your mother, and maybe it's too late to fix it." The boy didn't fully understand, but he hugged his grandfather tightly. Later, Evelyn returned with new documents. The investigations into the orphanage were ongoing, but she knew Hollis, the director, had powerful friends. "We need to be careful," she warned. But Ben was driven by a different urgency, the need to make amends for the past. "I want to fight for him. If I have to walk through hell, I will." Evelyn nodded, recognizing in his eyes something more than regret: redemption. As night fell, Ben opened an old box of memories. Among torn letters and war medals, he found an old photograph. Lena, still a child, hugging him. Time seemed to mock the image, but it also offered a fragile hope. He realized that if he didn't fight for Finn, he would repeat the mistake of a lifetime. Before going to sleep, Ben wrote a letter addressed to his daughter, even though he knew she would never read it. "I failed you, Lena, but I swear, this time I won't fail him." The wind rattled the window, and for a moment, the old man thought he heard a gentle reply, like forgiveness coming from the mountains. News of a boy staying at Ben's cabin spread quickly through Cedar Hollow. In a small town, secrets don't last long. At the local diner, residents whispered over coffee cups and suspicious glances. "Old Carter's finally lost his mind," muttered a miner. "They say he took a child and won't give him back." The word spread like a cold wind, fueled by malice. Ben noticed the change when he went down to the village for supplies. People watched him in silence. Some turned away, others stared with disapproval. He ignored them all, but the weight of their stares felt like lead. Evelyn waited for him in the truck, concerned. "They're being manipulated," she said. "Hala spread rumors that you kidnapped the boy." Anger flushed his face. "That man is vermin. He's trying to cover up his own crimes." Evelyn nodded. "And he can be dangerous. He's made entire families disappear from records." Ben felt his old soldier's instinct stirring inside him. The time of silence was over. When he returned home, he found Finn drawing near the fireplace. On the paper were two figures holding hands in front of a cabin, with a yellow sun above them. "That's you and me, Grandpa," the boy said, smiling. The word Grandpa struck Ben like an arrow. For a moment, the world seemed less gray. But the calm didn't last. That same night, Ben noticed footsteps outside the cabin, shadows moving between the trees. He took his shotgun and stood silent, watching through the window. A car turned off its headlights and drove down the road. Someone was watching them, and Ben knew exactly where the threat came from: the Cedar Hollow orphanage. The next morning, Evelyn brought a folder of files she had secretly obtained. The pages were yellowed, but contained enough to make Ben's blood boil. Fake records, interrupted adoptions, missing children. Evelyn explained, "Hollis has connections with judges and business people. He sells children to wealthy families out of state. Finn escaped by chance." Ben clenched his fists, his gaze hard as stone. "So this is what they call charity," he growled. The two spent the day going through the documents. Every name, every date revealed another layer of horror. Evelyn discovered that Ben's daughter Lena had tried to get her son back before dying in a rural hospital. To protect himself, Hollis had altered Finn's birth certificate and registered him under a different last name. Ben felt the ground disappear beneath him. His daughter had died alone, believing her father would never forgive her. "I should have gone after her," he murmured, his voice choked. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have the chance to do differently now." He looked up, his eyes moist. "It's not redemption I want, it's justice." The words came out quiet, but firm, like a promise made to his own heart. In the late afternoon, they decided to go to Cedar Hollow to confront Hollis. The orphanage, perched on a hill, looked like a sanctuary from a distance, but up close, its dark walls and dusty windows reeked of decay. Hollis greeted them with a cold smile. "Mr. Carter, what a surprise! Taking in orphans now," he sneered. Ben remained silent, his eyes fixed on the man. Evelyn placed the documents on the table. Hollis leafed through the pages unhurriedly, then laughed. "Flimsy evidence? You're too old to understand how the world works." Evelyn confronted him. "Perhaps, but now the whole county will understand." His smile vanished, his gaze turning icy. "Be careful, Miss Moore. Sometimes those who dig too deep end up buried themselves." When they left, the sky was already dark. Ben knew that smile hid something dangerous. "He's coming after us," he said. Evelyn nodded firmly. "Then we need to be ready." The shadows of the orphanage stretched behind them like invisible hands, while the mountain seemed to hold its breath. Night fell thick over the cabin. Ben tried to stay calm, but his intuition was strong. The distant sound of engines coming up the trail confirmed his fears. Hollis had sent men for the boy. "Finn, go to the basement, now." The boy obeyed without question. Evelyn turned off the lights and positioned herself by the window. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the wet wood of the porch. 3 men stepped out of a truck. "Carter, we're here for the boy," one shouted. Ben took the old shotgun from the wall. "Tell Hollis he'll have to go through me." The first shot echoed through the mountains like thunder. The confrontation had begun. The exchange of gunfire was brief but intense. Evelyn helped barricade the doors, and the sound of shattering glass filled the air. One of the intruders tried to climb through a window, but Ben knocked him down with the butt of his gun. Blood pounded in his temples. It felt like being back on the battlefield, only now the reason was purer. When silence finally returned, Ben noticed a deep gash on his shoulder. "We have to get out of here," Evelyn said. He nodded. Together they gathered Finn and some supplies and left the cabin, guided only by the moonlight. The dirt road led them to an abandoned mine, a refuge Ben had known since his youth. Inside the darkness, Finn cried softly. "Will they find us?" he asked. Ben hugged him, ignoring the pain from his wound. "Not while I'm breathing, son." Evelyn improvised a bandage and looked at the old man with silent admiration. He was no longer just a man filled with regret. Now he was a guardian. As the wind howled outside, Ben realized something. His fear had transformed into purpose. For the first time in decades, he wasn't running from the past, he was fighting against it. And in the shadows of that mine, the bond between the 3 of them solidified, forged in the fire of survival. Dawn crept into the mine with pale threads of light, and the cold of early morning turned every breath into mist. Ben woke before the others, his shoulder throbbing and his mind racing. The silence around them was almost absolute, broken only by the dripping water from the rocks. As he watched Finn sleep, the old man felt the crushing weight of the truth. He couldn't hide anything any longer. When the boy woke, his eyes still swollen, Ben called him close. "Finn, there's something you need to know." The boy looked at him curiously, clutching the wooden crucifix in his fingers. "I knew your mother. I was her father." The air seemed to stand still. Finn blinked, confused. "So, you're my grandfather?" Ben nodded, tears in his eyes. "And the biggest coward she ever knew." In a low voice, he told the story that had haunted him. How he had thrown his daughter out of the house, out of pride. How he never looked for her, and how fate was now forcing him to face what he had destroyed. Finn listened quietly, his eyes glistening. "She talked about you," the boy said, his voice trembling. She said that one day you would find me." Ben broke down. He cried as he hadn't cried since the war, feeling his grandson's small hands hugging him. Evelyn, who had overheard everything from a distance, approached quietly. "Now you understand why he can't go back to that orphanage," she said. "This boy is all that's left of your daughter, Ben, all that can still be saved." The old man wiped his face and took a deep breath. "Then it's time to end this." As night fell again, they made a plan. Ben would use his old connections to gather evidence of Hollis's past, and Evelyn would deliver it to authorities in another county, far from the village's influence. But Ben knew their enemy wouldn't stand by idly. Deep down he understood that the road to redemption passed through fire, and perhaps blood. 2 days later, Evelyn received a warning. Hollis had discovered the betrayal. "He's ordered everything destroyed," she said, distressed. "If they burn the files, we'll have no proof." Ben didn't hesitate. "Then we go before they do." The old man took his axe and revolver, his expression hardened by duty. Finn tried to hold him back. "Will you come back?" he asked, his eyes glistening. Ben placed a hand on his shoulder. "I promise." They drove to the orphanage under a stormy sky. The windows rattled in the wind, and the building seemed to breathe, ominous as a lurking beast. Inside, Hollis stood with 2 henchmen, burning papers in a metal barrel. "Too late, Carter," he smiled. "The past dies with the fire." But Ben didn't back down. "Not all fire destroys, Hollis. Some purifies." A gunshot rang out, shattering the windows. Evelyn ducked behind a table as Ben moved forward. Chaos took over the place. Flames licked at the curtains. Smoke filled the air. Hollis tried to escape through the corridors, but Ben caught up to him. "How many lives did you sell, you bastard?" He laughed, spitting ashes. "The ones no one wanted to save." The fire grew, swallowing the wooden ceiling. Evelyn yelled for them to get out, but Ben still held Hollis by the collar. "You'll pay for every child," he roared. A sharp crack preceded the partial collapse of the ceiling. Hollis fell under the debris, while Ben staggered outside, coughing and covered in soot. Evelyn rushed to help him. Outside, flames lit the sky, reflected in Finn's eyes as he waited in the truck. When Ben hugged him, stained with smoke and tears, the boy whispered, "I thought you weren't coming back." He replied hoarsely, "Promises are all I have left, kid, and I'd never break that one." The orphanage collapsed behind them, a flash that felt like the end. But for Ben, it was only the beginning of redemption. Sirens echoed across the mountains as Ben, Evelyn, and Finn drove away from the burning orphanage. The fire reflected in the truck's windows, tinting everything red and gold. Ben watched silently in the rearview mirror, not just a building burning there, but a lifetime of regret. Smoke rose like a belated funeral for the past. Suddenly, a loud bang shook the truck. "Ben, watch out!" Evelyn screamed as an explosion threw debris across the road. The truck skidded in the mud, rolling over once before coming to a stop. The world spun in confusion. When Ben opened his eyes, heat surrounded him. The orphanage fire had spread to the forest. He heard Finn's cries and the faint sound of Evelyn's voice calling for help. "Get out of here, boy!" he shouted, forcing himself to his feet despite the pain in his injured shoulder. A burning log blocked the path. The old man pulled the boy close and covered him with his body, shielding him from the smoke and sparks. "Don't look, Finn. It'll be over soon." As the forest burned, Ben saw visions. His daughter, Lena, smiling in the distance, reaching out to him. "Dad, that's enough," she said softly. He tried to answer, but his coughing prevented him. Evelyn appeared limping from the flames and managed to drag them out of the circle of fire. The cool, early morning air enveloped them like a miracle. Ben fell to his knees, gasping, holding Finn tightly. "Is it over, Grandpa?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. The old man hugged him, his face buried in his hair. "It's over, my son. It's over." Those words were not just a relief, but a whispered plea for forgiveness. For the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of guilt begin to lift. As firefighters brought the flames under control and police arrested Hollis, Evelyn watched him in silent awe. Ben had faced hell and survived, not just physically, but spiritually. Amid the smoke and ash, a new man emerged. Days later, Cedar Hollow dawned in an eerie silence. The orphanage had fallen into ruins, and newspaper headlines spoke of corruption, illegal adoptions, and the heroism of an old lumberjack. Ben, however, declined interviews. "I don't want to be anyone's hero. I just want to be his grandfather." Evelyn followed the legal process to secure Finn's custody. With the evidence submitted to the state court, everything was resolved surprisingly quickly. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The boy is now officially under your protection." Ben held the document with trembling hands, his eyes welling up. Finn ran to him and hugged him, smiling. "Now we're a real family, aren't we?" The old man responded only with a nod and an emotional sigh.
Over the following days, Ben began rebuilding the cabin. The windows were replaced, the roof repaired, and the house, once dark and silent, now filled with laughter and the smell of baking bread. Evelyn visited often, becoming part of their small home. "You know, Ben," she said one afternoon, "I think Lena would be proud of you." He looked toward the horizon and replied, "I don't know about proud, but maybe forgiveness." One morning, Finn appeared with a folded paper. It was a drawing, the three of them holding hands in front of the cabin with a huge sun behind the mountains. "Put it on the wall, Grandpa." Ben smiled, carefully hanging the drawing. "It's going to stay here forever." The boy laughed and hugged him, and in that simple gesture, the old man felt something reborn inside him. Something he thought he had lost forever: peace. At night, before sleeping, Ben looked at the starry sky and whispered, "Thank you, Lena. You sent him to me." The wind blew softly through the trees, like an invisible answer, and for the first time in many years, the lumberjack fell asleep without nightmares, lulled by the quiet sound of a new life beginning. Winter had started to fade, and the mountains of Cedar Hollow were turning green again. Melted snow flowed through the valleys, and the sound of running water brought a feeling of rebirth. Ben and Finn walked side by side along the trail leading to the old mine, now just a place of memories. The boy carried a small wooden box, found days earlier hidden under a rock in the yard. "Mom's name is here," Finn said, pointing to the carved initials, "L.C., Lena Carter." Ben felt his heart tighten. They sat on a rock and carefully opened the box. Inside was a yellowed letter and an old photograph. Ben recognized his daughter's young face and took a deep breath before reading. The words seemed to travel through time. "Dad, if you ever find this place, know that I forgive you. Don't hold on to anger or guilt anymore. Love my son the way I always loved you." Ben's hands trembled. He tried to read aloud, but his voice failed. Finn watched him with tear-filled eyes. "She forgave you, Grandpa," he whispered. Then nodded, tears flowing freely. "And I never knew how to ask for forgiveness. She was stronger than me." The boy hugged the old man tightly, and together they stayed there, listening to the wind passing through the trees. It seemed like the mountains were whispering Lena's name. Later, back at the cabin, Ben framed the letter and placed it above the fireplace. Evelyn arrived with groceries and smiled at the scene. "You two look at peace," she commented. "We are," the old man replied, with a serene glow in his eyes. "For the first time, everything is where it should be." She looked at Finn, who was playing with a small wooden boat, and felt that this house, once marked by pain, now overflowed with life. As the sun set behind the mountains, Finn ran to the porch. "Grandpa, the wind sounds like it's talking." Ben smiled. "The mountains have memory, son. They keep everything. The pain, the promises, and even the love we left behind." Finn leaned against him, and together they watched the orange sky. An imaginary camera would then pull away from the cabin, revealing the vast green valley and the gentle sound of the river. The final echo would be Ben's voice in thought. "Life always gives you another chance. Sometimes it comes with eyes that remind us of our mistakes, and a smile that teaches us how to forgive." And so, between forgiveness and rebirth, Cedar Hollow began breathing again, with the sound of a grandfather and grandson rewriting together the destiny that time had almost erased. If this story made you believe that forgiveness can even change fate, subscribe now. Here, every video is more than just a story. It's a piece of the human soul. Join us and keep feeling chapter after chapter.